Growth Decline Analysis Part 2. Who's available? For the critical period up to March 23rd lockdown, we need to see which countries had cases data to give us good growth rate data. Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. Our charts include both cases, left in blue, and deaths on the right, but given the short time scale before March 23rd, not like they rushed to get us locked down at all, deaths will have even less data, so we'll be focusing on cases. The dilution of testing wasn't an issue then. As described in supernormal, that looks like 3 panels, but it's 2. The upper panel has the main detail, with growth rate, wavy mauve, magenta and purple, auto-fit normal, blue humped, actual daily cases, blue dotted, and manual fit normal, green dashed. Although the concepts are straightforward, we are going to be diving straight in, which is why we have several videos, Chart and Stats Essentials, Part 1 of Growth Analysis and Supernormal, to introduce the charts and concepts for new viewers. On the bottom we have the magenta segment of growth rate extracted, the dotted blue growth rate decline line from the autofit, the dashed green line, which is our best fit manually, and green and blue cumulative curves just to show the difference in outcome for total cases, autofit normal to manual growth decline. As an ultra-quick reminder, each day cases are reported. The ratio of today's over yesterday's is the growth factor, which may be a decline or less than 1. When the factor hits unity, 1, the green line, then today's equals yesterday's, for example at peak. An exponential virus has a constant rate of growth. It just goes up and up, doubling each day or doubling every 5 days, as Ferguson seeded his model with, whatever that model was. In Report 9, it was an Excel spreadsheet log normal chart. No kidding, a $40 million Excel chart. Instead of the wavy purple line seen here, an exponential virus would have a horizontal line like the green unity line above the unity line at the growth rate. Not one of 214 countries has such a line. No historic epidemic or contagion has such a line. It is yet another myth created to scare. Except that the SI, SIR, SEIR models, the official primary models, do have lines that are 99.9% exponential. So we have real viruses that aren't exponential and official models that are, perfectly designed to exaggerate a crisis and create fear. Funny that. And finally, the pale mauve at left is when data is sparse, so not really useful or reflective of the curve. Then the magenta, when we've got real cases per day, greater than 10 from memory, and inside the March 23rd deadline. And finally the purple for what happened later. This is South Korea, which was already over by March 16th when Ferguson published his report. It shows a normal curve, not exponential, with declining growth rate, as normals must have, and 1/10 of the deaths of Hubei per 100 million population, and they didn't lock down. South Korea alone should have stopped Ferguson in his tracks, but he published anyway, and nobody bats an eyelid. Thomas Pueo even uses the backside of the normal contagion as evidence of South Korea controlling the virus, usurping the normal for the abnormal and the agenda. Here's the growth rate factors, F for the fit rate and decline rate, G or fit.decline, that I ended up with for these charts that I analysed. Not all are candidates for the early data, and not all are candidates at all. The tour shows all the countries, many of which have such sparse data they can't be analysed. But sparse is no virus, it's good. South Korea had a decline rate of 0.97. That means that each day's growth rate was 0.97 the previous days. It doesn't sound like much, nearly 1 after all, but that's a huge rate of loss as it compounds, giving us one of the best virus results in the world, barring just not getting it at all. Notice it had a starting growth rate of 4, so the next day's cases was 4 times the previous days, but we're not interested. Yet how much time was spent on R0 as an indicator of how aggressive a virus was? It's a complete fraud because every day the rate changes according to that growth. There is no R0. It's a plausible nonsense. We used an arbitrary start date that was just before lockdown, so we had the real and largest cases to work from. To get the next day's F akin to R, multiply by G. To get the previous day's F, divide by G. If today was 0 for F0, then yesterday was F minus 1, and tomorrow is F1. Any day is 0 day, and any other day could be also. The when did the first person arrive and oh my god we're all going to die infected meme is just another core fraudulent meme from epidemiology. But then since they omitted to mention that R0 is R0 because R changes every day, we should be surprised. Instead they sold us R0 and exponential for the next several weeks at the same rate, i.e. exponential, and hey presto, everyone infected, massive risk, lockdown, wait for the vaccine. Total fiction, and no epidemiologist or mathematician stood up to say, hey, this is nonsense. Remember that. So the seed growth rate is irrelevant. Sure, it's part of a trio of numbers that will define the chart, but that's it. The arbitrary seed date is not a start date, as we can work backwards to earlier dates. The growth rate on that date and the constant decline rate, and it's that decline rate that is critical, and no one mentions it. Well, you wouldn't if you were selling the agenda and the exponential meme, would you? Because exponential doesn't have a decline rate, or more accurately, its decline rate is g equals 1. It's a constant. Their absence of attention to it is confirmation that they were selling exponential by design, or through ignorance, when no virus in history has been exponential. Fraud, absolute and criminal fraud, pure and simple. So Korea, decline rate 0.97. That's high as a rate of decline, a low figure, as we'll see, but that'll do for now. Other countries in alphabetical order, and we'll just include a no magenta country, Austria. So while it's interesting, it's not pertinent to our what did Ferguson know or could he have known if he was honest and doing his job presentation. Belgium, and that's a good stretch of magenta. Not much, is it? Yet Ferguson and the government had no qualms implementing the country's most damaging civil decision in history. Bit of a rush, maybe? Too late, it was already a declining growth rate virus, i.e. normal, totally normal. Belgium's decline rate 0.988. Remember that, or don't. It's going to look very familiar. Now it's a bit squiggly, but with hindsight, the purple, we see that it did indeed fit very well. We want to be fair, or to totally nail Ferguson, leaving no room for wriggling out, so if that was our best indicator, we'd have to say it might be 0.988, or it might have been a far higher rate of reduction. But wait, that would be good for us and bad for Ferguson, with even fewer cases. Nice. With 214 countries to choose from, hence the tour, we were able to find all countries with magenta showing. Not always useful, but we know we've done an exhaustive study. Here's Croatia with sparse magenta. Not really a useful indicator. Fine. France, and wow, look at that. A solid indicator, pretty damn perfectly straight with that signature drop at the beginning. That's also going to be very familiar. Imagine R0 at the top of that magenta, the very first figure, and instantly it's irrelevant and massively lower. That's F0, not R0, so to speak, but you get the idea. This actually overwhelms me. It's so damning, and the injustice of what we've been subjected to when the data was right there, even before lockdown, and nobody noticed. All the professionals paid by the government and corporations conveniently not seeing the damning contradictory evidence. Moving on, and that's a 0.987 decline, very close to the 0.988 for Belgium. It gives us a green normal humped curve at the top, significantly below the actual cases, but we're not going to worry about that. We can do a country-by-country in-depth interpretation later. For now, it's that 0.987, 0.988 figure that's going to be critical. Hungary, 0.986, but we didn't get it from the magenta, not really, and that's key. We're putting ourselves in Ferguson's shoes or that of an advisor tasked to evaluate the nature of the virus. Magenta is all we have to go by, but we can see from the top chart there is a growth decline pretty much mirroring the 0.986 shown here. Iran, a pretty wild chart for when we do in-depth analysis of each country, but for forming an opinion based on magenta, wow, another great indicator. Very strong decline, pretty much straight, no way you can call that horizontal. And we've fitted a line to it at 0.986. It's a good fit overall. Ireland, a bit choppy, I'm focusing on the bottom magenta without the clutter of the main chart, but definitely descending. As the only chart, I'd say it could be shallower or steeper, but as a supporting chart, here we've fitted 0.989, a fraction gentler, less decline than 0.986, but very close. Italy, earliest hit in Europe after Hubei, China and South Korea, but wow, again that signature collapse right at the very beginning and a ruler straight growth rate decline line. So our first European indicator, and it's massively strong, extremely high confidence. It should be our base value and it's 0.989. Notice it also gives a pretty damn good prediction for the eventual autofit normal outcome in terms of cases. And indeed, you can see the actual cases curling over, dipping inside, arrowed. But suddenly there's more, and then there's that fat tail, and look at the purple diverging to horizontal. Yes, it'll be fascinating tail when we do our individual analysis, but you already know the story from our chart updates and other videos. A virus that detects peak diverges to stay high in cases and deaths. The virus doesn't have CNN, it doesn't understand peak, it doesn't report cases and deaths. Politicians do. Latvia, not one of our standard 50, but there it is sitting in the data with a not bad little segment of magenta. A bit wobbly if that was our only chart to go on, but as supporting evidence that middle section is at dawn. It's not in the table. Wait one, 0.986, familiar? Indeed, we began to start with 0.986 as the default because it kept on fitting so well. Now I'd really like you to appreciate how momentous this is, at least for me. Think about it. We have been besieged with data and information, a great deal of it false. Who'd have imagined that I'd have to declare the world's primary epidemiological models to be fraudulent? I didn't. How could I imagine that? All those professors and PhDs and data scientists, they couldn't all be wrong, or worse, compliant with the agenda. But one or other they were, because those SI, SIR, SCR models are totally fraudulent. And that's not an opinion, that's totally solid comparison between what they claim and what viruses actually do. Most dramatically shown by comparing no mitigation, no lockdown Sweden, actual figures versus the models. We've been sold exponential. No virus is exponential. We've seen people R0 hunting all over the place, article after article. But did anyone remember to point out that if there's an R0, it's because there's an R1 and an R2, so your model had better be good, because R0 is dead the moment it's appeared. And it turned out the models weren't good, were they? Unless good is massively exaggerating the threat to scare people. Not in my book. We've been told lockdown was working on multiple false pretenses. Lockdown is working. The curve is flattening. No, that's what cumulative distributions do. Check out logistic curve, Wikipedia, any humped curve, even an Egyptian curve, straight up 45 degrees and straight down ditto. Lockdown is working, growth rate is declining. No, growth rates decline from day one, literally. What are we looking at right now? Growth rates before lockdown, before Ferguson's paper, and what were they doing? Declining. Another lie, and who stands up to denounce it? No one in authority or science, that's for sure. We've even had lockdown is working. Submissions to our Register Your Symptoms social media app are declining. Priceless. So now medical science is based on social media engagement. You couldn't make it up. It's been massive fraud, and the data, can we trust that? China lied. Maybe, but their data looks good. UK lied, absolutely, no question. Even they admit that. In deaths, and now the fraudulent and tyrannical red herring of testing, further diluting any value cases once had. Tyrannical, Leicester is locked down solely because 900 people tested positive. As the beautiful meme puts it on Facebook, they were so sick they needed a test to find out about it. Precisely. You don't need to test for flu. Nobody tests for flu. You either have it or you don't. If it's bad, go to bed. If it's really bad, go to the doctor. Testing, another fraudulent myth and distractor. A virus detecting peak and going sideways, staying high in cases and deaths. The virus or the people reporting the virus? When even the data is bad, how on earth and where on earth are we going to find something that is real, something that hasn't been tampered with, and that we can call the true virus, or which at least can get us access to the true virus? So when I started to see 0.986, 0.989, 0.986, 0.987, 0.986, time after time the same figure, close enough, and often just starting with 0.986, that would be it. The fit would be so good I could just note it and move on. 0.986 again and again, or 0.986 to 0.989, who cares? Finally, one number or a tight range over and over again. Finally, a constant, and not just in that it's a constant growth rate, a constant fact across country after country. Are we finally looking at something we can rely upon? I believe so. I certainly consider it to be so. And we'll revisit Korea's high, low factor, high decline. Is that evidence of effective social compliance? Maybe. Maybe we finally have a real and effective test for whether social controls or lockdown are working. Again, using projection of the cases curve and noting the unchanging constant decline rate, we already proved a long time ago that Lockdown UK had not saved a single case, a single life. But finally we can go further and isolate the single determining factor in any contagion, the decline rate, or growth decline rate as I refer to it. It is our c, speed of light. It is our magical constant that changes everything, determines everything. Yes, to draw an accurate chart, we need a rate and a start date. But the start date is arbitrary, ideally something reasonable inside the curve of the contagion, and the rate will be whatever has been observed on that date. No R0 determining all, but whatever the rate happens to be on the chosen day. It is the growth decline rate that is constant, not the rate. And it is constant across countries, exactly as we'd need and expect of a true feature of the same virus. This is, mathematically, or to me as an analyst, overwhelming. It is the Rosetta Stone, ground zero for understanding and mapping virus contagions properly, rather than the nonsense that has been peddled to us, and which astonishingly or alarmingly is the official style of epidemiological analysis. Something went very wrong somewhere with epidemiology, that it has come to that. It was honourable, with Farr's insight, which it seems to be mirrored, centuries later. Epidemics are normal, normally distributed, and you can tell a lot from observation. That's what Farr said in a nutshell. What has our position been from the very beginning? Epidemics are normal, normally distributed, and you can tell a lot from observation. I feel a sense of awe harking back to a true scientist doing his best for his people. And of course it was a viewer that pointed out Farr's law, so thank you. It gave us credibility as far as I'm concerned, that we weren't just an amateur, we were recreating the original true epidemiology in the midst of this modern false epidemiology. And 0.986 or a constant growth rate decline factor. That's our lodestone. Everything follows from that, and the jigsaw fits together so elegantly. Normal curves that you can generate from ground zero before they lock you down. So yes, when we see a kinked magenta with 0.986 fitting the central portion perfectly, I wouldn't use it as our root or first determiner of that figure, but it's a strong supporter, yet another segment showing the same figure. And it's Latvia. Who on earth follows Latvia? But the data doesn't care. It's there, waiting to be revealed and to support the premise. Netherlands, another straight or pretty damn straight magenta segment. No doubt there where it's heading. Variation will be minimal. You could argue a little, but overall, no question, it's headed down broadly in that green dashed direction, and that figure 0.986. Norway, one of the original 6 countries we tracked, a bit has changed since then, but again some slight argument perhaps, but the main segment 0.989, our other candidate, not as popular, but several showing it. It's interesting that here the projection is higher, upper chart, green dashed, but look how well it fits both the leading edge and trailing edge. Are we again seeing evidence of effective social control? Did Norway miss out a whole chunk of cases? We'll have to look in detail, but not here. Poland, not much to go on as a detective looking for the number, but after the fact, evidence very shortly thereafter to 11th April UK peak, the true one that the government tried to avoid, an excellent fit, and the decline rate 0.99, another 0.989 in all but an 01. Interestingly, the true magenta fit is 0.98, a relatively high decline rate, low figure, and you can see how it tracks that early segment and fits the actual data, green dashed normal upper chart, very well. As we'd expect, growth rate of normal curve, they're the same thing, different perspective. But the contagion continued and the overall decline rate to 11th of April is better fitted by our 0.989 candidate. We'll use that versus 0.99 since 0.989 is popular elsewhere. Notice how we've got a very good fit for the actual early contagion that the green dashed line is modelling with that 0.989 rate. Notice also that while they're close, using the 0.986 rate, which looks pretty good at the bottom and which is only slightly off at the top, leads to a significantly different green dashed curve, not nearly such a good fit. Such is the power of the exponential, as Gary Hannington would put it, author of the agenda piece where he carefully tried to avoid actually lying, letting Thomas Pueo do the agenda puff piece charts and then going off on a tangent. What this emphasises is the extreme sensitivity of the final figures to the growth decline rate. It would be utterly foolish to just pick a figure and say, that'll be it. A 1% error, 0.98 to 0.99 for example, can be out by a factor of thousands, as we detailed in an article. And yet mainstream epidemiologists haven't even officially recognised the issue in this contagion. And of course their model is exponential, and changing from 0.99 to 1 isn't just big, it's the difference between limited and infinite. Fortunately, they invented models which get the advantage of exponential till the vast majority are infected. Then magically, courtesy of the arithmetic, the curve turns around and plummets just as precipitously, exponentially, to zero. Not in the least bit real, but very effective if you want to scare people. And finally, while we're here, the previous chart used a growth rate of 2.95 times on the seed date, and I've here modified it to 3.95 times. The green dashed line at bottom is now too high, no longer fitting the magenta. This illustrates how we get the gradient slope right first, the growth decline rate, then adjust the rate so it's on the magenta. It's very much like the auto-fit normal, where the scale and mean are read directly from the data, then we fit the standard deviation to match the peak height. For a given gradient, growth decline rate, there's only one rate that puts it through the magenta. The curve at top will then be what it is, and the issue becomes how well does that fit, just as with the auto-fit, how well does it fit? If it's a good fit, then the virus was normal. There's a lot of good fits. Russia, late starter, no magenta. The decline rate there is 0.995, a very high figure indicating low decline. The issue here, not overly relevant right now, is that being so late, it's got a lot of shallow data before it really gets started. So latecomers, we see it with India also, aren't really conforming to the 0.986 to 0.989, and we'll be curious to look at that. Will changing to a later start date change things? It shouldn't. More likely the shallow rate just reflects a reality in two very large, highly dispersed countries. There's no magic to 0.986 after all. The speed of sound is the speed of sound, but it isn't a constant miles per hour. It's a concept. The actual figure reflects atmospheric conditions, including air density. The actual growth decline rate is going to reflect geographic, cultural, environmental conditions. Most of the countries we track had dense conurbations and were similarly westernized. The 0.986 figure presumably reflects a virus spreading in that kind of environment. That it's found repeatedly 0.986 to 0.989 and consistently remains a powerful indicator that we're looking at the real virus spreading in our real environment, and we'll be working with that in more detail in the future. Sweden, and the most absurd chart of the 214 that we track in our chart updates. The punishment child, the bête noire of the agenda, no lockdown. But here we're all about magenta, and it's got a great, well-defined and strongly declining growth rate curve. Now we've listed it as 0.989, and that's this chart, an excellent fit down to peak, slightly ahead of 11th of April, because in those heady days of truth and naivety, it was indeed ahead of the UK, and unlike Italy, it was doing bloody well. The green dashed normal looks massively exaggerated versus the actual data, and that's because we're looking at 2 outbreaks. So most of the time, the growth rate was well below the constant rate for a single outbreak. The first was the magenta, and then there's a second, but after March 23rd. However, that was before the powers that be decided there'd be no peaks for Sweden. Like the UK, it goes flat, and unlike the UK, it is absurdly extended, even rises again, and being no lockdown, should be pure virus normal, and so is even more abnormal than the normal UK, which locked down. That's not for here. Now if we do the pure magenta, that's an astonishingly low 0.97, so very high decline rate. But notice how well it fits that very early outbreak. We also used the manual override on the autofit to show that, which has an even steeper gradient. As the advisor to the government, I'd be very intrigued. The well-defined magenta means we can or should take it seriously. The extremely steep line showing the rapid collapse of the virus would be a critical indicator. The 0.986 is excellent news, but it could collapse even faster. It makes the travesty and the tragedy of Sweden even more poignant, that consistently up till 11th April, when the powers that be cancelled peak, Sweden was actually leading the way in showing what a non-threat the virus was or could be. No wonder they had to shut it down. I think on that note we'll shut it down here as well. It's a good one to finish off on. We've got a bunch more to look at, but already the message should be clear. We've found a core value that is common across countries, so finally we're looking at the true virus, and from this one property and the country's data, we can readily generate a projection for the likely severity of the contagion. It doesn't have to be accurate to n decimal places. How accurate did Ferguson turn out to be? We would have been able to assure the government that based on multiple countries with consistent growth decline factors in the range typically between 0.986 and 0.989, that this was not going to be a material threat. Yes, deal with it properly. No, don't shut the nation and democracy down, as the fraudster Ferguson wants you to do. We've long been able to show the fraud of the original claims of lockdown, of flattening the curve, and we've long paid attention to both the normal distribution and growth rate, and we had the original projection from the curve. Finally, however, it has all come together, and we have our lodestone or Rosetta Stone, from which all else follows. 0.986, that's all you need to know, and how to apply it. I'm Andrew Mather, a 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever.